So, I was scrolling through social media the other day when I came across a post from IDV Clue. It mentioned that the Identity 5 and Death Note crossover will not be coming back. Ever. To all the Death Note fans out there, you all have my condolences. Personally, I'm not the biggest Death Note fan myself, though I did watch it all the way through back when I was younger. That being said, the whole topic of the Death Note crossover not returning has been talked about for a long time, and people are still bringing it up today. If you check Reddit or Discord, you'll see a lot of speculation about why it's gone, and plenty of fans wishing it would come back. There's even a petition going around for it, though I'm not too sure how much of a difference that'll make. The real question is, why? Why won't it return? Is there a particular reason behind it? And if it really is gone for good, what other franchises could possibly step in instead? That's what we'll be looking at today. The story of the IDV and Death Note crossover, and some potential crossovers that might happen in the future. Just a quick disclaimer before we dive in. Most of this info comes from IDV Clue on Twitter, plus fan discussions on Reddit and Discord. And the crossover ideas I'll share later are just the ones I came up with. If you don't agree, that's totally fine. You can always drop your own ideas in the comments, and honestly, I'd love to hear them. 2021 was a pretty big year for Identity 5 crossovers, with 4 of them happening back-to-back. We had the Promised Neverland crossover parts 1 and 2, the Line Friends crossover, the B-Duck Part 1, and of course, the Death Note crossover. The Death Note collaboration was first announced in April 2021 and was met with a lot of excitement from fans. Just a month later, on May 27, the crossover officially launched and ran for a month. During this time, players had the chance to grab 3 survivor skins. Lawyer's A-tier skin as Light Yagami, Prisoner's A-tier skin as L, and Mechanic's A-tier skin as Misa Amane. On the Hunter side, Evil Reptilian was the only one to receive a skin, but it was a big one, an S-tier skin of Ryuk. These skins were available through the crossover essence, which also included a few themed accessories. Alongside that, players could collect some extra freebies, stickers, portraits, and even a furniture piece called L's Seat. There were also pets based on the Shinigami, characters Rem and Jealous, which could be unlocked with echoes or fragments. The event ran until the 27th of June 2021, but about a week before it ended, the official Japanese Identity 5 Twitter account made an announcement that surprised a lot of people. The Death Note crossover would not be getting a rerun. In other words, if you missed it, that was your only shot. So now the big question is, why? Plenty of other crossovers have had reruns, so why was Death Note treated differently? Some people might have already noticed this, but while the Death Note crossover was hyped back then, it didn't actually happen in the country the game is based on, China. Another country that didn't get the event was Russia. And before we dive into why, let's pull back a bit and talk about the anime itself. First aired in 2006, Death Note tells the story of Light Yagami, a genius high school student who stumbles upon a mysterious notebook called the Death Note. The book belongs to a Shinigami, or Grim Reaper, named Ryuk, and whoever owns it gains the power to kill anyone just by writing their name inside. Light, with his own twisted sense of justice, decides to use it to wipe out people he deems immoral and build a so-called crime-free world. He even takes on the alias Kira, this godlike figure that people either fear or worship. Of course, he's not unchallenged. The brilliant and eccentric Detective L is hot on his trail, leading to the iconic cat-and-mouse battle fans know so well. Now, here's the problem. The anime didn't exactly have an easy ride worldwide. According to reports from the Times of India and Gamerant, several countries either censored it heavily or outright banned it. Why? For a few reasons. First, the violence. Death Note was often criticized for its graphic depictions of blood and disturbing themes, which some groups argued could negatively impact younger viewers. Then, there's the influence factor. Stories came out about students making their own death notes in schools, writing down the names of teachers or classmates they didn't like. In China, the controversy grew so big that schools outright banned customized notebooks to prevent kids from doing that. Another sticking point was Ryuk himself. China has strict regulations against showing supernatural beings, especially ones tied to death or the afterlife. So, a character like Ryuk was basically a red flag from the start. Meanwhile, Russia also banned Death Note, citing concerns about its potential influence on young people, especially regarding themes of self-harm, and they didn't stop there. Other anime with similar dark themes were also banned. Outside of these two countries, the anime was still closely monitored, with some versions only available after heavy censorship. So, knowing that Death Note was banned in both China and Russia, it starts to make sense why the crossover didn't appear in those regions. But then comes the big question. Is that the reason it never came back? Here's where speculation enters. Some players believe that because NetEase is based in China, the crossover not being available on the Chinese server was the main reason it didn't return, or maybe even the only reason. Fans often point to an example. The Junji Ito crossover rerun in 2024. Originally, one of the skins, the Painted Girl, didn't appear on the Chinese server back in 2019. And when the event came back years later, that skin was missing completely. That fueled the theory that if something couldn't be released in China the first time, it just wouldn't come back at all. But that's just one side of the story, because there are other examples that give fans a little bit of hope. For instance, in 2024, another NetEase game called Knives Out did get a Death Note crossover, though only in the Japanese server. This showed that crossovers tied to Death Note aren't completely impossible. Plus, some events that people thought would never return actually did, like Persona 5 and Junji Ito. Still, with NetEase officially saying on Twitter that the Death Note crossover won't have a rerun, the chances look pretty slim. Personally, I'd say maybe there's like a tiny percentage chance, like less than pulling an S-tier skin on your first essence. But hey, I guess nothing's ever 100% impossible. If the demand is high enough and the timing's right, maybe things could change. If you're curious about the whole Death Note crossover story, I definitely recommend checking out the discussions yourself too. There's a lot of speculation out there, and this is just the best summary I can put together for you. I might have missed a detail or two along the way, so feel free to explore further. But anyway, since the Death Note crossover most likely won't be coming back, let's switch gears and talk about something a little more exciting. Other potential crossovers. Because honestly, there are a lot of possibilities when it comes to Identity 5. NetEase ran surveys in 2021 and 2024, asking players what kind of franchises they liked, with speculation arising that these surveys were made to see what crossovers they'd like to see. And fun fact, some of those suggestions actually turned into real collabs. So, it's not just wishful thinking. What players want can sometimes influence what we get. Now, I've covered possible crossovers in a couple of my older videos, but I thought it'd be fun to revisit the topic with you again today. Some of these ideas are based on those official surveys, and others are just my own thoughts about what would make sense or be really cool. And of course, this is all just speculation, so if you've got different ideas, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'd love to see what crossovers you all would want to see. Alright, let's dive in. I've actually talked about this franchise in one of my older videos, but since Steins showed up in both the 2021 and 2024 surveys, I figured, why not bring it back with a fresher perspective? So, Steins follows the story of Rintaro Okabe, a self-proclaimed mad scientist. Which, seriously, is just another way of saying, unemployed guy with too much free time. He spends his days hanging out in a makeshift lab with his friends Mayuri and Daru, cooking up random inventions that are, for the most part, totally useless. That is, until they meet a woman named Mikise Kurisu. Thanks to her, they realize one of their silly gadgets actually works, and not just in a small way. It's a time machine. From that point on, the story dives deep into the consequences of messing with the past. Rintaro is forced to watch his closest friends, Mayuri and later Kurisu, face tragic fates again and again, until he and Kurisu have no choice but to fix everything themselves. At its core, Steins Gate is about more than just time travel. It's about the cost of changing the past, the pain of sacrifice, and learning to move forward with love, regret, and forgiveness. Now, let's map this to Identity 5, Suzuha Amane, who carries one of the biggest twists in the whole story, still feels like a perfect fit for Tracy Resnick in my mind. As for Rintaro and Kurisu, since both of their arcs revolve around regret and forgiving the past, I'd pair them with Orpheus and Alice. Mayuri, with her cheerful and gentle nature, feels like a good match for the dancer, while Daru, with his bulkier build and chill vibe, fits nicely as forward. Bleach follows Ichigo Kurosaki, an ordinary teenager. Well, as ordinary as someone who can see ghosts can be. His life takes a sharp turn when he runs into Rukia Kuchiki, a soul reaper. Soul reapers are basically spiritual warriors who guide souls to the afterlife and protect the living from monstrous spirits called hollows. During one battle, Rukia gets injured and ends up transferring her powers to Ichigo, forcing him to step in and take on her duties as a soul reaper. But the story doesn't just stop there. As Bleach goes on, it's not only about Ichigo protecting his town or fighting alongside his friends. The series digs into bigger mysteries, the truth about the Soul Reapers, the hidden layers of their world, and most importantly, Ichigo's own identity. Now, if we imagine this as an Identity 5 crossover, here's how I see it. Ichigo and his human friends fit best as survivors, while the Soul Reapers would take the hunter roles. For example, Unohana feels like a good match for Mary, while Kenpachi's overwhelming strength makes him a solid fit for Percy. As for Ichigo himself, I can picture him as Emil paired with Orihime as Ada, but another fun option would be Ichigo as Ganji, with his sword replacing the baseball bat. Orihime could also be swapped to Emily depending on the interpretation. And for Yasutora Chad, I think Forward would fit him pretty well, given his both characters' abilities. I think most people are already familiar with this franchise, but just in case someone isn't, Resident Evil 3 follows Jill Valentine, a former STARS officer, as she tries to escape Raccoon City during a horrifying viral outbreak caused by the Umbrella Corporation. Thanks to the T-virus, the city's population has turned into zombies, and on top of that, Umbrella has unleashed monstrous bioweapons. What used to be a bustling city is now a complete death trap. Jill's main goal is survival, but things get even worse when Nemesis shows up. He's a massive bioweapon built specifically to hunt down and eliminate the last surviving STARS members, and he doesn't stop coming. Along the way, Jill teams up with Carlos Oliveira, a soldier from Umbrella's private military unit. Despite their rocky start, the two form a shaky alliance to try and make it out alive. Now, if I were to map this into an Identity 5 crossover, here's how I'd see it. Jill would be best represented by Martha Bahamfil. Both have military backgrounds. Jill as a former special police officer, and Martha as a cavalry soldier who later became part of the Air Force. Carlos fits perfectly as mercenary, while his teammate Tyrell could match the escapologist. As for Nemesis, I think Hester works well, since both have that towering, scary presence, and yes, the tentacles seal the deal. Black Butler follows the story of Ciel Phantomhive, a young earl in Victorian England who secretly works as the Queen's guard dog, taking on the grim task of investigating crimes in London's underworld. After the murder of his parents and his own traumatic kidnapping, Ciel strikes a deal with a demon, Sebastian. Disguised as the perfect butler, Sebastian serves Ciel faithfully, but not for free. The contract is simple. In exchange for Sebastian's unwavering loyalty and supernatural assistance, Ciel's soul will eventually belong to him. Their relationship is as fascinating as it is unsettling. On one hand, you have Ciel, driven by vengeance and his need for control. On the other, there's Sebastian, who carries out Ciel's will with almost terrifying precision. Together, they navigate a web of conspiracies and dangers. At its core, Black Butler is about vengeance, morality, and survival of, and the high price of making a deal with forces beyond human understanding. Mapping this into Identity 5, I'd say Sebastian fits perfectly as Jack the Ripper. Both share that tall, sharp, and elegant look. As for Ciel Phantomhive, I'd put him as the painter. He's an aristocrat, just like Edgar Valden, who came from nobility, so the parallel feels natural. And then we have Mayrin, the maid with marksmanship skills. I think the coordinator matches her best, considering both of them come from that kind of disciplined background. So, yeah. In the end, the Death Note crossover might not be coming back, but there are still plenty of other franchises that could turn into amazing crossovers. Is there a specific one you'd love to see? Drop it in the comments. And if I missed anything, feel free to add your own context too. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is Silmina, signing off.